really disturbing theme in the Gospel of Mark. And it was pointed out to me when I was at the biblical conference, and the theme is that the disciples are the ones who don't believe. It's really remarkable when you look at it. Who are the ones who don't get it? The disciples. Over and over again, Mark is very clear to show Jesus being very explicit, and the disciples are like, what's that mean? And he's like, guys, like I just told you. And then it happens again and again and again. So the theme in Mark is the hardness of heart of the disciples. Why does he do that? Why does he show that? Because it's meant to give us hope. Do you think that the church will last because Jesus picked the right people to run the church? No. In fact, he's showing from the very beginning, his inner circle is hard of heart. And the only thing that changes them is the Holy Spirit. Of themselves, they don't have what it takes. He shows very clearly every single one of them lacks what it takes. And over again, even though he explains things to them, they don't get it. So do you sometimes have trouble getting things? You're in good company. Isn't that good news? It's good news. If God can take these knuckleheads who lived with him, who saw the miracles, who experienced the teaching firsthand, did not get it, and they ended up running the church, and the church survived, it will continue to survive with you and with me. Isn't this good news? This is great news, because we look at the world and we say, how is it possible the church is surviving? Guess what? How is it possible it even got off the ground? These guys are just, they are, like, you wonder, oh, are they the ones they're the ones, he says, if you don't get this parable, you're not going to get any of them. What is he saying? I gave you the word and you're the path. Satan took the word right from you right as soon as I gave it to you. The apostles, the 12, he has to take a rototiller to them. And that's what he does on Pentecost. He does a rototiller on them of the Holy Spirit. And so wherever you are in your life, brothers and sisters, the Lord wishes to rototill the hardness of your heart and make it ready to receive the seed. You desperately need him, because the disciples desperately needed him just to get it. And we can look at each one of these and see remarkably, I think, points in our life where we are each of these, aren't we? It's not like our soil stays stable, just like in a garden. It doesn't stay stable. You have to continue to fertilize it every year and rototill it and weed it. Otherwise, it will convert to the path. Otherwise, weeds will creep in. And I think the most difficult thing we see right now, and I speak about it so often because it's true and I know it from personal experience and I see it every single day, the weed, brothers and sisters, that is choking the vast majority of us is our technology. What does it say? These, the sown among thorns, are another sort. They hear the word, but worldly anxiety, the lure of riches, and craving for other things intrude and choke the word. I see a lot of people who are great Catholics who love Jesus. I see a lot of our young people have great desire, and then what happens? Phone robs all of it. I was just down in Mexico, had just an incredible time of 2 weeks without technology. It was so great. Well, a week really without technology. But went over to dinner with a family, and it was so beautiful. We had to sing along, we had a great time, we had dinner, and then after dinner, like a bunch of kids, extended family, and every single child was on their device, and I noticed the change in the atmosphere immediately. And I'm going, do you not see what just happened here? We're having this moment of communion, and all of a sudden the diabolos, the divider, entered into that space and just broke it apart. And it broke my heart. It just broke my heart. And I see this happen every single day in our families. I see it happen when I'm trying to do things and then I get distracted on the computer and I'm divided in my heart. It's the most efficient, effective weed ever created by Satan. We have to take it very seriously, brothers and sisters. I have not preached hard enough against it. I do not believe that it is possible to be a saint and have one of these devices in our pocket. I have not seen one yet. Because remember, Blessed Carlo Acutis died before the invention of the iPad. We don't have a saint yet canonized after the invention of the smart device, and I don't know if we will. Because, friends, what does it do? It constantly calls to us craving for other things? I don't know. But I look at St. Francis de Sales, whom we celebrate today, and he's a remarkable saint and bishop. I studied him a little bit because he was on my final exam. And so I remember him very clearly. But his Introduction to the Devout Life, his book, if you haven't read it yet, you should make that your next spiritual reading, because his task as a bishop, he was the first bishop to do this, to write a book to teach ordinary lay people how to become saints. You know, it's interesting. We don't think about this very often, but this idea that sanctity is for everybody was not widely understood in the church. Most people thought if you wanted to really be a saint, you had to become a bishop or a monk or a nun, right? But you couldn't be really a saint unless you were a martyr, right? If you weren't a religious, right? You know, it was really just kind of in people's understanding. Now, the church never taught this, but this is what people's experience was. If I really want to be holy, then I better become a monk, or I better become a nun. And Francis de Sales said very specifically, you are called to holiness in every state of life, because baptism is the call to holiness. You can't say, oh, I'm not a monk, therefore I can't be holy. Baloney! You're baptized. You must be holy. The living God lives inside of you. You have to respond to that and purify your life, whether you are a married person or a single person. But it will look different. And that was the revolution. He says, you don't have to try and pray like a monk to be holy, but you must pray. He says it is dysfunctional for a priest to want to pray like a layperson, or a layperson to want to pray like a priest, right? Because you don't have a similar calling, right? You are called to sanctify your day, and it may be that you can't do all of the prayers the monastics do. And some people, they feel very guilty that they can't do that. You're not called to do that. However, you might be. Some saints live the monastic life in their married life, and it's very beautiful when they do, right? But the fact is that he was the first to really propose, what does lay spirituality look like? Because we have a ton of works on what religious spiritual life looks like, because you've given up everything else. Your day must be around prayer and work. But what do you do when you have earthly preoccupations? How do you live in the world but not have worldly anxieties that choke the word? That's the challenge, isn't it? Right? And you know, and I've said this before too, because I see religious too, where they've got the cell phones. I'm like, you gave up everything. What are you doing inviting the weed into your house? Right? It's crazy. The interior life, friends, we have to really create strong boundaries around our technology in our homes, so that our homes are places of quiet and reflection. We need that. St. Francis de Sales, you need to take time, everybody, whether they're monk or layperson, you need to take quiet time to pray. Right? You do. But it might look different. And then when you have that quiet prayer time, he says, basically you need to, proper devotion, he says, is like a bee that pollinates a flower. It enters into the flower and leaves it without destroying the flower, but actually making it fruitful. That's an image of what appropriate prayer does to your soul. It's not something that does violence to your soul or makes you exhausted. Right? If you're exhausted with your prayer, you're not doing it right. Because your prayer shouldn't exhaust you. Your prayer should give you life. I know people who do all-night prayer vigils and they're not tired. You know why? Because God is calling them to that. But if you're like, I got to do that because that's what so-and-so does. I got to pray all night, and you try and do it and you're wrecked the next day. Okay? It was pride that was motivating that and not the Holy Spirit. We have to be very careful, friends, because just because John Vianney lived on potatoes and milk doesn't mean you should. I mean that quite seriously, because for a long time I looked at some of these saints, I'm like, oh, I got to do that to be holy. They were led to that by God over a long period of time. John Vianney didn't just one day wake up and say, I'm going to just eat a potato and drink milk and I'll be fine. Like, no. Years of self-denial, and then he got to the parish and God led him to those places, right? And so the fact is, friends, is that the way you can know if your spirituality is appropriate to your life is if your primary vocation is being lifted up. If you're a married person and your spiritual life is wrecking your marriage, it is not the right kind of prayer for you. Does that make sense? Right? If you are neglecting your family needs, right, to pray, then we have to say that is dysfunctional. You must pray, right? But we can't use our prayer as an excuse to avoid our duties. If you're fulfilling all your duties and then they just don't like the fact that you pray, that's persecution, okay? But we have to know the difference. We have to discern that, right? Right? We have to then make the time, be like, no, we're spending time, we're having quality time as a family here, we're doing these things together, it's great, and I need my quiet time too in prayer, okay? They'll have no problem with that if you come back from your prayer and you're more loving. But I see many spouses who don't convert because their spouses are coming to Mass and they come home and they're just as nasty as before. And they have a reasonable objection to say, if you really are believing that you're receiving Jesus, how come you're no different when you come home? The same is true with me as a priest. I touch these mysteries every day, and if I'm not becoming more charitable, I'm doing it wrong. Right? All of us, we just have to look at this and say, is my soil receiving the word, or is it just bouncing off? I'm coming, I'm showing up, but is it transforming my life, and does it bear fruit in faith, hope, and charity? Every single one of us, that's what we should be doing this Lent. When you think about what should I do, what should I give up, what should I do extra, because we're coming up in a few weeks, right? Valentine's Day, by the way, get ready, okay? So prepare, you have a couple of weeks left, but be thinking about this. What changes do I need to make? What do I need to remove from my life that's keeping me from God? What is choking me that I need to give up? And then what do I need to add that will give life to me and to my vocation? That's what our Lord wants. He wants us to be self-denial so that we give up our addiction to our pleasures, to create space for contemplation and acts of charity. And if we do those things, then we'll be saintly in whatever state in life you are. So let's come before the Lord today and ask for grace that we would bear fruit 30 and 60 and 100-fold, and realize that if you're hard of heart right now, so were the disciples. Come, Holy Spirit, bring the rototiller to my heart.